Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm your host, Kyptan, and with me today are Eradandis
Hey there.
and Little Red Book.
Hello.
Today we'll be continuing our discussion of the Uplift Storm trilogy, talking about the first half of Infinity's Shore up to and including Part 6. Because this is a middle book in a series, we're going to be talking about spoilers for the Uplift Storm trilogy, but not past the halfway point of Infinity's Shore. So if you're worried about spoilers, now would be a good time to head out, listen to our earlier episodes, listen to the Uplift Primer, and maybe go and read a book. Okay, how did everyone like this book? How did it feel coming off of Brightness Reef? Were you happy picking back up from that cliffhanger ending?
Yes, that was definitely a good thing. I was a little stressed at the end of Brightness Reef. It was nice to know that everybody's okay. Well, no, not everybody's okay, but our kids are okay.
Yep. Yep. Our main point of view characters are all okay, but their world is kind of crumbling around them, isn't it?
It really is. Things are
Era,
not
how about
good.
you?
I thought this is probably, like, as I reread it, it's probably my least favorite so far. It's just not that Bren's a bad writer. He's an excellent writer. It was just uneven. Like, there were parts, like, when it was good, it was phenomenal. And then kind of when it dipped, it was like, oh, okay, I can get past this really fast. So, but honestly, like, the last book, you guys liked Alvin and the crew a lot more than I did. And this time, I thought Alvin and the crew were like the shining stars of this part of the book.
I wanted to see more of them, but they got compressed because the point of view characters in this book are split up into two groups, the Streakers and the Sooners. And Alvin used to be a whole half of the book in Brightness Reef, whereas now he's fighting for space in a half of the book, grouped in with all the rest of the Sooners. Though, to be fair, the Streakers get significantly fewer viewpoints, or shorter, anyways.
That's true. And I guess part of my quibble, and I'm specifically using the word quibble because it's a minor point, is that like we're now, was it 1, 2, 3, 4? We have one more book left in the trilogy, and we've now gone through how many books now? We've gone through quite a few books, and we're being
It depends
introduced
on if we
to.
count Sundiver, because we read it but didn't do an episode.
Okay, let's not count Sundiver, but we're
Let's not.
getting. I counted roughly 4 more new viewpoints. So
Yep.
while I like some of the viewpoints, it's like, do we really need more viewpoints at this stage in the book? That was part of my quibble, if that makes any
So-
sense at all.
I brought this up in my notes. I wrote that he's starting to suffer from what happened to Game of Thrones, the series, is that as you get more and more characters, you can have those characters, just not their viewpoints, please. There's just too many.
You
It's
guys
starting
are
to get.
absolutely talking about what I agree with is the problem of this book, the first half of this book. There's so many viewpoints that by the time we've been through a quarter of the book, we've basically just caught up on where everyone is now.
Yep.
And that's a long time to catch up. For those Jordan's fans out there, it's not Crossroads of Twilight bad, but it certainly slows down the pace of the book, of the series.
I was just going to say, we can have those characters in the book. We just don't need viewpoints from them. You know what I mean?
Right.
I have a different thing to say about that, but I've read Heaven's Reach.
Yeah. He has 2 choices he could have made, in my opinion. He could have not made it a trilogy and made it more books, or he needed to listen to his editor a little bit more and shift some of his viewpoints around to kind of keep it streamlined. Because honestly, like, one of the characters I really miss seeing a lot more of, who has been, at least for the first part of this book, kind of shunted to the side, is Sarah.
Was it ready?
It was, oh yeah, I read it, yeah. I was talking about Sarah though.
I honestly am not a huge fan of the Ka subplot of
Yeah.
the dolphins in the shore base. I'm not a huge fan of that subplot.
I mean, it's there.
I'm not a huge fan of the Tisht subplot either.
Well,
see.
so are we talking about the Tish in the context of the relationship to the Rothan, or are you talking about that specific subplot, or
Yes.
just
Yes.
So that reminds me, that gets me to, because I was thinking a lot about, we had talked about this offline, about part of the premise of the first book is how the species that have been uplifted want to go back to a point of their version of grace, right? Completely devolved.
Yep.
I initially agreed with you, but after I thought about it a little bit, I think the Tish storyline actually coincides with that thought pattern, because I think part of what Bryn's trying to talk about here is that there is an immense pressure in society generally, and in this book,
Yeah.
to conform, right? And so you have these people like, if we just conform to the galactic standard, we will no longer be persecuted. So I think that's what the Tish storyline is supposed to be illustrating.
It's a new type of Danakite for us to look at.
I'm trying to remember which one Tish is. I'm
Tish
sorry.
is the dolphin lieutenant who's like basically second in command of Streaker.
Okay.
He's going to betray everybody.
But
Right.
had sent a distress call with Jijo's location to the Rothan and
Okay.
led them there in the first
See,
place.
this is part of the
Because she
problem.
was a true believer.
There's so many names and there's so many, and I read it last week, and so like.
Yeah. My criticism of Tish is that she just feels a little bit one-dimensional, but I get that point, Era. I really get that point. But I think that Bryn is the kind of writer who, wow, this has gone off the rails. But I'm fine with
Already.
it. But I'm fine with it. I think Bryn is the kind of writer who puts that into every character that they build. They will always consider the effects of the Galactic Society and of the society in which they grew up in, and on pretty much every character. He doesn't build a world where someone seems to have been protected inside of a bubble their entire life. He doesn't do that.
Agreed. What I will say, so I know I kind of started off guns blazing on the criticism, but some of the things I mean, this has become, it's always been a theme in all of his books, but it really, really kind of hit me this time on Infinity Shore, is that, there's a lot of potential space battles or combat or whatever scenes that he could have spent time doing. This could very well have been a military sci-fi book. It really, really could, right? But he spends
It needs more people for that.
Yeah, but I mean, he spends approximately zero time on the actual combat itself, and spends
Yes.
all this time on the motivations leading up to it and the effects after it, which actually I really like. I mean, in the context of this book, I really, really liked it. Probably because I assume we're going to talk about one of the characters later who has changed sides.
Okay. So, quick rating. Where would you put this in comparison to other Uplift books? Era, you at the bottom so far, other than Sundiver?
Yes.
Okay. Red?
Yes.
I've only read half the book, so I don't feel like I could have an opinion, honestly. But
Okay. I'm tempted to either put it at the bottom or the second bottom, but my opinion of it has definitely changed over the years, because I used to think this was so much better than Brightness Reef because it had all the flashy technology that I wanted more of. In Brightness Reef, I was like, okay, come on, let's get to the fun tech. Let's get to the fun tech. And it happens like kind of at the end, but Infinity Shore is just full of it. There's multiple species of galactics on the planet confirmed. There's 3 separate starships have come to the planet. Again, the 6 alien species again, but now they're starting to mount a resistance. They have an active like counter occupational force and strategy going, which we'd only kind of gotten hints of more of a Brightness Reef. They try diplomacy. In Infinity Shores, it's very clear that it's failed.
there was a really funny line. We'll get to it later. But it made me laugh and think of Era.
So yeah, just for the pacing problems in the first half of the book, because the threads haven't meshed up yet, the characters haven't met each other and simplified fully into like one cohesive viewpoint or plot line, I guess. Just because of that, I have to put it in last, because I love the setup that Brightness Reef did, and I love the character work that Brightness Reef did to give us these characters that we love. And too much of the first half of this book feels like, okay, we're catching up with Lark and Reddy. Sorry, Reddy and Dwyer, as they're with a robot, and they're the last people to find out everything.
I'll stand by my very previous my statement of Brightness Reef. He could have just completely cut out the whole Reddy plotline and Dwyer. Even though I like Dwyer, he could have cut out Dwyer and used up that real estate to spend more time with other characters, and we would have lost nothing.
But Dwyer.
I like Dwyer.
I like him a lot.
I like him a lot now. Okay, let's move on to our favorite 3 kids, the Cool Hans.
I want to make a quick point here because this is one of the things I absolutely love about David Brin. Just love. It's in the early part of the book. It's from Alvin's viewpoint.
Oh,
where,
okay.
Is that who we're talking about?
I just realized I never did my recap. I wrote a recap and I haven't read it.
Oh.
I will stop. I want to hear your recap. Let's do Ken proud.
Okay, now that we've discussed general thoughts, let's go for a quick recap of where we left off. So we open with a POV from Ka, second pilot of Streaker, as he explores the water of Jijo for the first time. We follow him, Cyborg Han Susi, pensive Jillian Baskin, traitorous Tisht, and the rest of the Streaker's crew catching up on what they were up to before Brightness Reef and reconciling up until the point where they abduct the kids in their bath escape. Alvin and said kids are imprisoned, healed, interrogated, and freed, but Alvin demands to be returned to the ship, having guessed the identity of his captors. Along the way, we find that the Noor are secretly Titlal, and Mudfoot can talk. Sarah and Emerson travel through an underground tunnel to a hidden enclave of horsewomen in the spectral flow and continue on to Mount Gwen, with both reclaiming pieces of their pasts. We last left Lark at the Glade, but now he's a junior sage and in charge of holding Ling captive. He works with her to try and find a cure for the engineered plague affecting the Qin, but they need to enlist Rand's help to do so. Lark destroys her faith in the Rothan to do so, but Rand is not so easily swayed. After a disastrous accident at Duden Mesa, Lark and Ling attempt to get medical help from the time-entombed Rothan ship. While an exchange of goods is conducted, Rand sneaks away to signal the chauffeur above, and Lark, Ling, and Rand are all discovered at the surface of the lake. We left Dwerg dangling from the bottom of Reddy's loaned robot, and that's exactly where we find him, racing through the Grey Hills. He and Reddy manage to make common cause when they witness Kun's ship get shot down by a chauffeur corvette, but not before it takes a disabling blow as well. Because both landed in a coastal milk spider, Dwer enlists its help in destroying the Corvette. He's quite surprised when Mudfoot arrives with a mechanical bird that speaks in Alvin's voice. That one wasn't as pithy. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was great.
You forgot one thing.
What did I forget?
What happened to our favorite Trekkie?
Oh my god. I don't want to realize that.
Oh no. Oh.
We're all plucking this off, right?
Fine. I have a quote staring at me from my other monitor.
Go ahead.
The Oele did not fail, so great with their mastery of the genetic arts. What was their transforming gift? New, ambitious rings. Master rings. Like me.
Yeah. So
Ask is now East West.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I'm so upset, guys. That whole part was so upsetting.
Oh my god.
To me, it was one of the best parts of the first part of the book.
Our narrator is a slave inside his own mind.
Right. I mean, look, A, you get to see firsthand why Asks was so terrified of becoming a chauffeur, right? But B, I think, to me, Asks in the first book was relatable but foreign, right? In this book, he's a chauffeur and, to me, truly alien, right? Because he's literally fighting within his own mind. The closest analogy I have is maybe somebody with a mental illness, and I don't think that's a good analogy. But I mean, I was totally fascinated by it. It's a tragic arc, and I like that Brin went there with it. I don't know, what did you guys think?
It parallels allegories of an abusive relationship with dissociative identity disorder, but it's entirely its own new and unique thing in fiction. There is no humanly correlate. It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
I mean,
he melted his own core.
Yeah. And he does it as a heroic act to prevent the Jofar from knowing stuff, which was just...
I'm sorry I'm using he, they, it. I'm not... We don't have the right galactic languages to say the correct pronouns.
No, we don't. When the rings fight back, the master ring, he says, no, I'm going to hurt you because I love you. And I'm going to make you conform because I care about you. And that kind of stuff, which is kind of like an abusive relationship in a lot of respects. But it's just, yeah, it's brutal. I might have cried a few times.
Yeah. And I do like the way Brin characterized it, where the Trekkie, and they actually talk about this in the book, Trekkie are empathic and communicative.
They do.
And like they get along with people because they take the time to understand them and they're very deliberative. Whereas the Jofur are action-oriented, very egotistical, right? In both the good way and the bad way, right? But the trade-off for them being that egotistical is that they've completely lost their capacity for empathy. Just completely lost it. And they actually talk about that in the book. Maybe we need to pretend to be tricky and pretend that we care about other people. I mean, they're borderline, so I would call them sociopathic when they get the master rings.
Oh, absolutely. No, they have no empathy.
Yeah. One of the cool things that Bren does when he's writing this, though, is at the beginning of the book, there's still the I, we, they, us construct. And slowly, as you go further and further into the book, there's less of that and much more I. And I just thought that was brilliantly handled. It was really well done. And it really makes you feel what's happening to him.
In text, it's even clearer because in text, the I, we is always like italicized and lowercase to look as small and fragile as possible. And then it starts getting capitals. The Jofer speak in all caps.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
Like, what was their transforming gift? Like me. Those were capitalized phrases.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, every time he talks, it's always capitalized, except when he's expended himself so much in trying to control the other rings. They actually make it back to normal case.
Yep.
So
you see that struggle, and we'll see more of it.
But I didn't mean to sidetrack it, but
breaks my heart. Breaks my heart, and that's But again, he's very rarely doing anything to the plot.
He gives us insight into what's going on with the Jofer, though.
And he stepped forward.
Yeah.
When the Jofer ship was razing that forest, was razing the glade and killing everything around him and near him. Asks stepped forward and moved towards danger. And that was a unanimous vote among all the rings.
Mm-hmm.
And the master ring is like, remembering that, oh, you are brave, my rings.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Jofer ring gives them credit for that, which really does a great job to weaken its arguments about the weakness of Trachees.
Right. And that whole plan so this is one of the things that he does that's important to the plot, is that he mentions that the Jofer have this grand plan now to mass produce master rings so that they can basically enslave all of the Trachees and leave them in charge of the planet.
Yeah.
And then they can adopt all these creatures as their clients.
And they would have all this information on Earthlings and the other galactic species that are stranded there because they have living relatives.
I mean, it's a brilliant plan. It really is. It's not
a brilliant plan, assuming no one catches you. And that's the thing. They're assuming that no one will ever hold them to account for their actions.
Because they lack empathy.
And they tend to murder everybody who tries.
Yeah, they're kind of murdery.
Yeah, but I would say that I think Bren, at least in my opinion, is showing us the inside thoughts of the Jofer actually gives us an implicit rebuke of the uplift process, right? Because we see the Trachees, we see how they act, and if they had never gotten the Master Rings, could they have become a star-faring species? I think probably. It just would have taken a lot longer, right?
Yeah.
But their patrons didn't want that, right? They wanted something else, so they just designed them in a different way, right?
Well, that's actually like the heresy, is because the Trachees were uplifted. They were brought from their like rural little 4 or 5 stacks in the wild to larger stacks. They just lacked ambition. They lacked the desire to be great, to be influential, to wield power across the galactic stage. And
they just wanted to live their little lives in their little.
They were starfaring. They were just boring starfarers because they liked everybody. They were moderates. They were part of the like unacting galactic moderate clan, and the Poa were kind of disappointed in that. And so they hired the Oeli, and the Oeli came in and they made the Master Rings. And now you can say a lot of things about the Jofer, but you can't say that they're unimportant. And I mean, the obligation to be great is something that Bryn brings up a lot.
And the cost of it.
Sure, the Jofer are like one of the big... I would lump them in as one of the species that has been uplifted, abused during uplift. Like, undeniably abused. It's very clear that not every Uplift is like this, but
Right. I mean, I think it comes back around to the, what it's the rebuke of the uplift process itself. If you're going to design a species, right, then whoever's the designer gets to make the choices. And we've talked about this back in the Uplift War podcast, right? And how the humans are
yep.
making choices for the chimpanzees, and like the Joe Fur, the end result of a process gone. I mean, we could call it a process gone wrong, right?
Well, it even comes up, I don't know if we talked about it, but even comes up in Startide Rising because the dolphin that's always flirting with Jillian, I can't remember his name.
Yep.
He's getting little hands on his flippers, and he's Sapuru, yeah. And he's very ambivalent. He's like, I want my beautiful sleek body. I don't want these little hands.
Yep.
So, and the Gekek, I mean, I'm sure they had a reason for making them have wheels, but really?
Yeah, what was the quote from the book? Is like the only way the Gekek can walk the path of redemption is if it's paved.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't remember who their patrons were, but
You could say that the Gekek have the opportunity to regress, to be de-evolved, but do
what
they
do you?
physically anymore? Like,
Yeah,
could they
exactly.
possibly? That's Uplift beyond the point of no return.
I think so.
Well
So,
beyond.
can we
Ugh.
talk about something happier, like maybe Alvin and his friends?
Hey,
No.
I just have one point I want to make about Alvin, and then I'll let you guys riff, okay?
Sure.
It's just a meta point that Brent does earlier in the book, where Alvin is, so when I'm writing about this in my book, there's two ways you can write about this sequence, and he kind of talks about the two literary ways he can do it.
Yep.
I stopped and I laughed for 5 minutes straight because I'm like, okay, I got it, Bryn. That is hilarious. And then anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because it's kind of one of those meta points that Bryn always finds a way to put into his books. And I love it when he does that.
Bryn will always be writerly.
I was wondering if he wasn't maybe channeling Little Bren, like who he like. You know what I mean? Like, is
That's
Alvin
cute.
Little Bren? Because you got to think even though he wasn't professionally a writer until he was older, he must have been writing forever.
Yes.
Because he's just so skilled at the craft.
He also started very early.
But he was professionally scientist or something, right? I mean,
Yep, he was a scientist. He was a professor for a while, and then he became a visiting scholar at UCLA, and then he left to be a writer full time. And now he's mostly left from being a writer to be a futurist full time, which is a career.
It's kind of humbling to read his life story. You kind of go, wow, okay, that's a brilliant person. So, but anyways,
what do you have to do to get a well-paid job as a futurist?
I don't even know exactly what that is.
Write the Uplift series.
Apparently win 3 Hugo Awards. He gets hired by organizations and governments to tell them about how the future is likely to be so that they can plan for it.
And the thing is, apparently he's accurate enough that they keep on hiring him.
Yes.
Oh. So, yeah, anyway, that's what I thought when I read that whole part. I'm like, is this
like he was an early advocate of cloud computing.
So
cool.
So what are your guys' thoughts on Alvin and crew?
My favorite part of this whole section is the process that they go through to figure out that the dolphins are dolphins and that they're earthlings, and the Huck and Alvin all work together to put together the clues because they've only been interacting with the Timbremi, however you say that, computer since they got on board, and they just put things together, and I just thought it was like a fun little mystery, and I really enjoyed it.
Machine.
Yeah,
I love the Nis Machine.
He's funny.
To support your point, I think Bryn is kind of subtly telling us this story with Alvin and the kids. It's the important one because every prelude is Jillian's diary, talking about the kids, and kind of putting in the context of the whole story. But it's, hey, these kids they know a lot of human stuff. They're utterly alien, but wow, like human culture. Anyways, so I like that little touch as well.
I like Alvin writes in his journal. He's given actually a little computer that he can talk to, and it'll put the words up on the wall and stuff.
Yep.
And I like how the kids are just completely baffled by the species tension, the interspecies tension in the galaxy. They just don't understand it because that's not their experience.
And all of the Galactics don't understand Jijo civilization.
Right.
But through the interactions of Alvin and the kids and the Streakers crew, Jillian actually gets a much more complete picture of what's going on the planet's surface than any of the other galactic clans.
Yep.
Because she's human and she understands basically how to read a novel.
I was going to say they also have share a lot of culture actually because of the great printing.
Yep.
That's an excellent point. And it's funny because it's also the seeds for the brewing rebellion at the Streaker too, because some people refuse to accept that these aliens will act anything other than the galactic civilization that they experience.
Specifically, that they will act anything unlike what the Galactic Institutes like to pretend that galactic civilization is like.
That's right.
What the codes and the honor of war, if those were actually followed, humanity would be in a much simpler place. But they're not.
It's interesting. It specifically, this book, the first part of the book, recalls a lot of my kind of Jewish heritage kind of growing up, because it was impressed upon us when we were learning about the Torah, and kind of how to read and interpret everything, books and reading. Everything was put through there are rules and laws that you have to live by. And if you follow these rules and laws, you can question them and you can push against them. But as long as you live by them, everybody else is going to follow them and you're okay. Right. And then you have, obviously, on the other end, the Joe Fur who are like, yeah, screw that.
And the Rothan.
I'm saying I got that general feel.
Rothan and Jofar are just different in power level.
Yeah, they're the same though. As far as their mentality.
Yes, very similar. Predators.
Red, since you brought the Rothan, what do you think about the Rothan now?
No, just a minute.
Go. Okay.
I want to read a quote from Alvin.
Go ahead.
Because he's so fun. His being in his head is so fun. I noticed that the voice never answered Huck's question. Typical grown-ups, whether Hoonish parents or alien contraptions, they're all basically the same. I just love that.
So I have a question about Alvin for both of you guys. What would you have thought had the first half of this book had been half of the first half of the book to be just Alvin's story? Alvin and his friends, their story, and then the other half being some of the other protagonists, some of the other points of view.
Well, I wouldn't have been, how did Dwyer get down from that robot? But I would have missed some of the other storylines. I really would have.
I would have, because one of my favorite things, there's two things I really enjoy the most. And that's Dwyer using the milk spider to kill the ship, and Lark and his rescue plan to rescue the Rothan and the humans off the ship.
Sarah's journey is much more subtle in this first half.
Yeah.
It would not be my favorite storyline, but it would have a couple of my favorite moments, which is because that's what I was going to list as my favorite bit of this first half is Sarah and the strangers' journey across the spectral flow, and especially the night they spend in G, because Sarah finally gets to know where her mother came from. That has a pretty big effect on her.
I'm trying to think of how, because I think that it feels like that there's a lot of setup that's being done.
Yeah.
And until I get further into the book, it'd be hard for me to know.
That journey itself is boring, though.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun to be in the stranger's head every once in a while. Emerson's head, we know he is now.
Absolutely, because now he's figured out that his memory blocks were artificially implanted.
I think by the Rothan, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. Anyway.
I think it's pretty clear who did it, but you can say that.
Okay. I'm like I said, there is so much going on in this book that sometimes I get confused. And I remember asking you online about something, and then 5 pages later, I was like, oh yeah, I already read how this happens. So anyway, you were going to ask me what I think about the Rothan era.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. They're liars, and they're clearly trying to take control of humans and their clients to seek status in the galaxy. And
Can I add a follow-up
And
to that question?
well, no, I'm not quite done. Also,
Okay.
they are genocidal maniacs who carry around bioweapons in their ship, which is really bad. It's very, very bad.
Just habitually.
Yeah, it's just like a thing that, we're loading up, getting ready to go out in the stars. Oh, and did you grab all the bioweapons and stick them in the ship with us? But I don't have any really, like, beyond that. That's all obvious stuff. So they have creatures
What was your
that make them look
follow-up?
The follow-up was tell us how you feel about the Rothan, but also tell us how you feel about Ling's relationship with the Rothan.
well, she was a part of the inner circle. So
She wasn't, yeah.
she didn't know about the bioweapons. I'm pretty sure she didn't know about them.
No.
And she didn't know what they actually looked like. And she's been living in this colony, and she's only ever interacted with them a little bit. And she's in a cult. And Larks tries to decult her. He does successfully. In fact, after they rescue all those humans, like everyone except Ron or Rand or whatever his name is, they are all just furious and angry, and they feel abused. I mean, the Rothan wanted to pin the genocide on humankind.
Yeah, they did.
They
They've
were,
committed at least 2 acts of genocide
yep.
and have tried to commit a third.
And their plan is to glean whatever knowledge that they can from these planets and then leave humanity holding the
Yep.
bag.
Jijo is currently the site of like 5 or 6 attempted genocides.
Oh,
If you want a good thought as to why David Brin has a career as a futurist, he wrote this in the late 1990s, and
Yep.
he's essentially predicting that if you have a persuasive set of people, that you can get a large body of people to exhibit cult-like behavior. I'm just pointing that out.
Warrior Outpost, the idea of it is it's so repulsive. It's a captive population of hostages that you've duped into thinking that you're their legitimate owners.
and there you have their best interest at heart
Yep.
when you really had the opposite.
And they pay them with gene sculpting and with body mods, and they ask them to do their dirty work.
And long lives too. They live to be like 300 years old or something.
Yeah, they live to be pretty long. I don't think it's specifically confirmed though. I love the description of 1 minute and I will find it.
I am planning on getting the ebook, but apparently it's not available until tomorrow because with the new cover rollout or something. I don't know. I'm like, it's been out for years.
So I guess the one other comment I'd make definitely about this series, you see it in Brightness Reef, but it really starts hitting home in Infinity Shore, is that this isn't a YA novel, right? I mean, you get into some, I don't want to say dark stuff because I don't think it's dark, but it's real, right? He's dealing with real issues and real consequences for people's actions. I like that.
I found it. Lark stared at the woman next to him, awed by the blazing intensity of her wreck aura. Till that moment, she must have held a slim hope that it was all a mistake, that Lark's indictment of her Rothan gods had a flaw in it somewhere, that there was some alternative explanation. Now every complicating what if vanished. The flame of her anger made Rand seem like a pale thing.
So good.
And not long after that, when her Star God brethren try to extort payment out of the 6 for providing a vaccine to the genocide that they have unleashed, she just grabs the vaccine they've made, hands it off to some little kid and says, "Run." And he runs.
So one of the cool things that's going on is you have one of a kind hanging out in the woods. And instead of doing what he's supposed to be doing, he's capturing and he's basically making a collection of things. And he
Yep.
uses this weird golden stuff, which they figure out how to melt so that they can start using the stuff that's been captured in time by the Mulk Spider. The Jofar have a ship trapped in weird gold stuff that creates a quantum force field, basically. So is it the same
Yep.
stuff? I think it is probably the same stuff.
It is the same stuff.
Okay.
It's called Toporgic.
Well, I haven't gotten to the name yet. Not that I would remember.
No,
it
it
if
was
I
in there.
had.
It was in there.
No, see it.
Yep.
Names. Nah.
Yep. They first refer to it as organically folded time.
Yep. Which
And then apparently the short name for that is Toporgic.
okay.
And because the Trachea are masters of genetic and chemical synthesis, apparently they can just fold time, or at least unfold it.
Right.
That is alien biology right there.
Yeah. And that was just, I mean, reading that whole part where they figure out that they can turn their back on I was like, this is so cool.
And then when they're dissolving the tunnel, Lark accidentally sees like the insides of someone going through it.
Yes.
And he knows what they had for lunch.
Ew.
And he loses his appetite a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I just
That's
love
fun.
that. I would have been sad if that had been cut. I loved it.
Yeah, no. That couldn't be cut. Come on, that's fun. And
Any
then there was
thoughts,
the plot point with Rand escaping.
thoughts, Era?
What, with Rand escaping?
Just in general, about the Mulk spider and the weird gold goo.
And then Lark and Ling attempting to combat Rand.
So the thing I liked about the Mulk spiders is that you really get a sense of their age, right? And kind of what their goal, like you get a more sense of their goals and what they're trying to do. And then you get to see a little bit more of the word trying to reckon with the existence of the Mulk spiders and the Mulk spiders trying to reckon with Dwarf, right? So I did like that part of the book. And then I love that discovery of that they're actually dealing with a titball, right? Or Dwarf was dealing with another sapient species. So I did like that. But actually, what I was thinking about when you guys were talking was there's a huge part of the first part of the book is the discussion of what do they call it again? The path of redemption, about all these uplift species either wanting to or partially going towards devolving themselves, with humanity realizing we can't, right? Like it's not something we are capable of. And I just wonder what you guys thought kind of about that generally, just kind of what did you guys just think about that? Because I thought that was one of the more fascinating parts of the book.
I think it's interesting. I completely agree with you, but I do think there's also the point to note about the path of redemption not being paved, in that I think that if we were to get a point of view from the Gekek sage Vubin, that he might think we are also frauds because we can never tread the path of redemption like the Glavers. We have no biological chance of doing that. And so I think it would be interesting to see which of the 6 sages think that redemption is something they can achieve, if any.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder too. Well, humans aren't. We aren't capable of it. And it's really interesting too, as Lark is wrestling within himself, and he's got the hots for Ling and he's got tech envy.
Yep.
And I think he changes sides. I think he realizes that we can't. Specifically him. Not I mean, there are other human characters obviously weren't like looking for
Hey,
that.
he's still being a celibate monk of a man, okay?
Um
Celibate monk of a man.
um still for right now, I mean technically I'm celibate. So I thought that was really interesting. And also he has this scene where he's looking at the city, the Gekek city. And he's like, how could the universe not want this wonderful, wild, crazy creature to exist? If they die here, then they're going to be extinct, and that can't be a good thing. And
Yeah.
I think it was pretty clear in Brightness Reef that the humans said, oh yeah, we're totally here to seek the path of redemption and blah, blah, blah. Wink, we're going to print all the books. And then Lark even admits that they just wanted to go colonize something.
And we just happen to bring horses, right?
And they just happened to bring, it was like a whole Wild West thing. Although I do have a question. Okay, they brought horses. Why didn't they bring dogs? That seems weird to me. Horses, but not dogs.
I don't know. Maybe it's because dogs are carnivores.
And we also got a sense, I believe it was an Uplift war, that dogs are kind of next on the list for being uplifted. So
Yes.
I don't know kind of if that was an influence on that. I don't know,
Yeah.
But yeah, they brought horses and they're going to go live the Wild West on this new planet.
I think he actually has a short story about a dog that got partially uplifted.
He
Not
does.
fully.
In Uplift War, he does. It like gets really distracted, but it tries to think things.
Yeah. But I think it's also published separately as a short story.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
For the whole devolution thing, I mean, we've talked about it kind of like, in the book, it's, look, these species who've been uplifted, they can kind of go back and the less, well, I guess the more uplifted they are, the harder it is to access, but they can still kind of access the primitive side, right? Their original selves, right? And humans can't do that because our original selves are who we are right now. There's no kind of, you can't go back to what you were originally, right? But that did get me to thinking this time reading it that I also got the impression it's a metaphor for responsibility, right? Like you have these species who, hey, we want you to be a part of society. We need you to be responsible adults in society. And then you have people going, no, I don't want the responsibility. I'm out, right?
Yes.
And that's just something that really hit me this time around. I guess because I'm older and I'm trying to raise kids and I'm trying to teach them to be responsible. And I see them at times saying, no, I don't want this. I don't want the responsibility. I'm out. That's what hit me this time. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Lark has this great line about how the people who settled Jijo were playing hooky.
Some of them.
Well, no, that's the reason why they colonized it, to play hooky. They didn't want the responsibility of being part of galactic
That's the
life.
Hoons. Yeah.
Oh, the Hoons. Okay.
But the Gekeks were doing it to survive.
Oh, yeah, because they were going to get murdered.
Were doing it to, like, a lot of them had reasons.
When I said people, I meant humans, but
Lark has that theory, but I think he knows it's wrong. I think he knows that people were sent to Jijo to, like, now that he's heard of the Streaker crisis and, like, how distressed humanity is out in the galactics, because he doesn't believe Ling that, don't worry, the Rothan will take care of everything. He now believes that humanity is truly threatened with extinction, much like the Gekek were. I don't think he thinks humans are so selfish anymore.
he might be moving. Maybe that's further in the book because I might be moving towards that.
He's moving towards it, yes.
But I don't think he's actually there yet. I could be wrong. I'm trying to remember.
I don't think he's there yet. He's still a heretic. He's still like, no, we have to end our occupation of Jijo. We have to not be colonists. But I do like Era's point about the dolphins, especially because, like, what, 50 of the Dolphins of Streaker's crew have now lost the ability to speak in Anglic and are now being basically kept in a kindergarten because they can't bear up to the stresses of being hunted across the galaxy.
And we're talking about, like, developed dolphins, right? Like we have the one who's an astrocartographer who had reverted, right?
Yeah.
So
the Streaker crew was almost, except for Dr. Metz's experiments, the cream of the crop. And his experiments were just the cream of his crop, which was a weird, twisted version of Uplift. But we have essentially, what, a third of the Streaker crew or something is out of commission. They are on a skeleton. They only have a few trusted crewfen who have stood up to everything. Jillian's the last full human on board because now Han Susi has been transformed into a cyborg, and she's holding up. She has to hold everything on her shoulders because she's the one who has to take responsibility. And, like, yes, there's a crew council, but they always just do what Jillian says. She is an example of a good patron.
Yes. Part of it is that Kradecki was holding them together in a lot of respects. He would take them through the mental disciplines that they needed.
Yep.
Part of it is because they're very newly uplifted. Like they're only, maybe 200 years?
And she has no way to know if the difference of having Kradecki would be enough to keep her crewfen intelligent, would be enough to keep them on task and on mission. She has no idea. She has no way to quantify if what has happened is her own personal failing. And so my heart goes out to her.
That's true, but it's implied that, Kradecki was a genius, right?
Yep.
I mean, it was said.
But she's supposed to be too.
Yeah.
She, Hikahi, Tom Orley, Kradecki, they're all supposed to be designated heroes.
Well, yeah, that actually gets to something that Susi kind of comes to the realization of, oh, wait, the crew was handpicked to be the cream of the crop, but the officers were picked to be the cream of the cream of the crop. Like,
oh yeah,
Kradecki wasn't just like the best the Dolphins could do. He was like literally like a superhero dolphin in terms of his ability to do things, right? Same thing with Tom and Jillian.
That man was so brilliant that just speaking would earn him boatloads of money in any port in the galaxies.
Right. I do like how they, over and over again, I do like the callbacks to Star Tide Rising. They talk about their lost crew, right? And kind of like going back to go, wow, those guys were really awesome. We really missed them, and I missed them, right? I miss reading about them. So I do like the callbacks of, Toshiko, he was awesome, right? Kiparu, awesome. Like,
Yep.
they bring up those guys. The one person they don't bring up, which I wonder if Red has any thoughts is on Toshiko's love interest. Remember her? She stayed behind. They don't ever mention her.
No, they don't. I don't think there's a K in
I
his
don't know
name,
if
by
I
the
have.
way. Is there?
Is it Toshio? I'm
It's
sorry.
Toshio. Yeah.
Toshio, I'm sorry.
I don't have particular thoughts on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just thought, like, because we live
Denny
in a
Sudman
culture now that's
was
more
B tier.
sensitive. Yeah,
What?
exactly.
Denny Sudman was a B tier scientist who was looking to increase her resume.
Oh, her.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's her canonical reason for being on the crew.
Yeah. Yep.
Like
How
the
did
most
she get on the
junior
crew?
scientist. She was the most junior scientist on the crew.
With an inferiority complex, but maybe
Yep.
she deserved to have one.
Yep. Because her specialty was not supposed to be an important one.
And the whole reason that Emerson is in the fix that he's in is they've lost all their heroes.
Yes. Yes.
'Cause
They
they've been
used up
through
their
so
hero
much.
budget.
But even Emerson, like, when Susie kind of thinks about him, is like, okay, like, I can't think of another person who's actually capable of keeping the ship together except Emerson. Like, his particular genius was
He could keep it running. Yeah.
Yep.
right.
His particular genius was not the theory, it was the execution of engine maintenance.
That's right. I remember when I got to that point of the book this time, when I read that, and then going back to thinking about Emerson's state right now, that's what made me realize that Infinity Shore is a tragedy. It's set up as the same way that like Macbeth or any of the Shakespearean tragedies or Greek tragedy, Infinity Shore is written as a tragedy. And that's what, to me, gave all the things that are going on in the book, what's happening to Asks, what's happening to the Jijoans, what's happening to the Streaker crew. If you look at the context of he's writing with the tragedy tropes, to me, it all of a sudden gave it much more resonance. And I don't know if you guys had that feeling.
When you said it, I had already finished reading it, the first half, but I will definitely keep it in mind when I'm reading the second half, because I think you might be onto something there. Might be. I don't want it to be a tragedy.
I disagree. I disagree because it's a middle book, but I do think that this is where a lot of minor impediments to the characters come up.
Having your
There's
brain missing is not a minor impediment. He has a giant hole in his head. That's like a big deal.
No, but specifically like in the Stranger Sarah storyline, like she falls off of her horse and gets injured on a rock slope.
Yeah, what was up with that? That was
Or
weird.
like Dedinger goes missing and might be a problem later down the line. On her pathway, those are some very minor impediments. But the thing that they do get, and this is what I was originally way back at the start of this going to talk about, was each sibling, each Kulhan sibling experiences some form of psychic phenomena during this first half of the book.
Mhm.
And they get better at it.
Mhm.
Sarah learns how to look at the spectral flow and relax her eyes and look at it unshielded. Dwyer lets the robot conduct its fields through his body to ferry it across rivers and streams. And Lark has his little thing with the sensor stone at Duden Mesa. His, like, I want to call it like an epileptic fit induced by psychic rocks. We'll call it that. And he also has a bit of a sigh moment when, what do you call it? Lark has constant sigh moments whenever he mentions that stone around his throat.
The chip off the egg.
It's hard to pick one out, but it's constantly being mentioned.
Yeah, any thoughts on the egg yet?
I think the egg is from the planet and probably made by the Boyers from the psychic rock. And the psychic rock, whether the Boyer made the rock overloaded with psychic or whether it was naturally occurring on the planet, I haven't figured that out yet. Because we find out that the Boyer are a kind of prankster race, even though they don't exist anymore. Or at least it's hinted at.
Yeah.
Because when they're melting down all the stuff out of One of a Kind, they're like, is this like an actual thing that we can use? Or is this just one of the Boyer's jokes?
The mad milk spider of the mountains.
Yeah. Poor guy. He was just lonely and he went kind of crazy.
It's true. It's true. He went kind of crazy, but in a very useful way.
Yeah.
Very plot relevant and
I
useful
was just
way.
gonna say he went crazy because the plot needed him to.
Still a great
Well
character
before the plot.
anyways.
Yeah, he's great.
And yeah, Dwyer eventually ends up communicating with a Mulk Spider and convincing it to kill the Jofer Corvette.
Which is one of my favorite parts. I love that part. I loved it so much.
Which, like, that's way more skill than the other two siblings are having right now. Unless we take Lester Campbell at his word that in order to use the Sensor Stone, it takes a lot of training, because Lark saw that instantly.
I think that he's much more coming to terms with his abilities than the other two at this point in the story. So, which is
Acknowledging
nice
that
to
they're
see.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That.
Yep.
What about favorite scenes?
Favorite scenes is good. We've already done 2 of them, so I think really, Era, we're looking for yours.
I think my favorite scenes, I'm going to go with the interludes with Jillian's journal diaries. So normally we get our narrator is supposed to be Asks or Ewask. This time around, I kind of felt like Jillian was our narrator because in her portion of the books, not only does she talk about Alvin and kind of what's going on, but she's also beginning to synthesize what's going on with Jijo with what's going on with Streaker and the rest of the galactic races. I really like getting that kind of overall viewpoint and beginning to kind of, okay, so this strain that's way up here that I think is unrelated is actually related to this strain over there, and it's all beginning to come together. So seeing that kind of slowly come together as we go through part 1, part 2, part 3, when we see Jillian's diary, that's the part I liked.
I like that her introduction to Jijo was through Alvin and the kids, because it shows her a much less guarded version of the slope. It shows her a bunch of ambitious little youngsters who truly love each other, and there's no division by race among them. They're like, hey, maybe we could get a human, but no human lives in our town. But wouldn't it be cool if we had a
Yeah.
complete like group?
Yeah.
And the only Trekkie in our town is the old pharmacist, and he's too old. He doesn't want to play with us because we're little children. But he always gives us little sour balls when we get our drugs. Her getting to kind of fall in love with the slope from Alvin's journal and diary and from meeting the kids, that's really sweet to watch. It's really nice to see her find something good in the world, as opposed to having to discover the depths to which galactic society does not live up to its own standards.
I mean, they're horribly betrayed when they're at the one of those planets that they went to try and get help, and they're like, no.
Oaka. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, okay, there we go.
The
Eh,
green world where every breath could kill you.
right. There was something I wanted to ask about. At the beginning of part 5, I don't know who's talking really, but they're talking about, I know it's from the Jofaran perspective. I didn't write it down as a quote, crap. Anyway, they're talking about new useful tools based on our experience in Jijo. And then they talk about triachie outbreaks.
Trickiness.
So that scares me because I'm like, does this mean that they won or just that they learned stuff while they were there? I don't know. That kind of goes towards predictions. And I'm sure you're not going to answer my question anyway. So what does this mean? Tell me.
So I do want to mention one more little thing about I guess the trachea, because we were talking about how Bryn subtly kind of makes things more and more evident that Ewasks is no longer a trachea, it's actually a Jofer. And we talked about, do you remember what Asks used to say in Brightness Reef, kind of like at the start? It'd always be, do not be afraid, my rings, right? Or do not be afraid, my, some way of
Right.
like, so this is on page 116. Here's how he starts this particular paragraph. Do not be afraid, my lesser parts.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that's why I called it. Look, Ewask is my favorite point of view character, not because I enjoy what's happening, but because it's so powerful. It's so powerful and affecting.
He just casually drops in the fact that to remove the master ring, you might be able to salvage maybe up to half of the rest of them. And he thinks,
Mhm.
that's a lovely high number, but don't worry, I will survive.
Oh God.
Can you be comforted in that? Oh,
Well, there's a big through thread there of like, egotism versus empathy. That's the direct contrast that Bryn's making. That the more self-involved you are, the more you just care about just yourself and what you need to do to succeed on your own, the less you care about others and the consequences that happen to others, right?
Yeah.
Not that I'm making any real life comparisons, but Bryn is really, really good at reading the future.
It also makes us as readers lose hope that this master ring might be removed without harm. No, this was a violent and pretty irrevocable process that just happened. There is no retreat, there is no return. We didn't quite lose a character, but we basically lost a character.
Well, but I mean, like, reading it this time, it kind of makes me want to revise what we said happened to the characters in Star Tide Rising at the end, right?
Yep.
They're gone. Like, they're gone, right? He leaves it as a loose end, but I mean, it's a loose end with one likely outcome, right? So,
I don't think they're
and
gone.
it kind of, if we look at this as a tragedy, I think it's better. That's my one last statement on that.
Tom and his friends are out there somewhere in the stars.
There you go.
We can revisit this in Heaven's Reach.
I'm just throwing Kip some softballs because when it comes to Heaven's Reach, she's going to be dunking all over me. So,
Yep. We will revisit this in Heaven's Reach, and we will revisit Sarah in Heaven's Reach, or at least her ideas in Heaven's Reach when we talk about progress. Era, you and we're going to say the same thing, right?
I have one more question.
Okay.
Do either one of you believe that there's one particular character that's kind of speaking with Bryn's voice, with Bryn's point of view?
Sarah.
Yeah, probably. Probably Sarah.
I agree. I agree.
I mean, if I had to pick a character.
I think you're right. Go ahead, Kip.
Yep. They're all talking about Sarah's heresy and progress, and they're giving a million different hints to it at the first quarter of this book. And I'm like, yeah, we get it. We get it. Like, Jijo and civilization is thriving and growing, and if the Jofur hadn't come in, and if the Rothan hadn't come in and tried to genocide 3 of the species, and if the Jofur hadn't come in and tried to genocide 2 more of them, then we might be in a different situation. And like, Sarah's civilization of the future might naturally evolve, and the downward path might eventually at some point be abandoned as an actual concept. And they're all just like, well, we'll let the institutes judge us later.
Yeah, they've been, by the time this book has started, basically all the species have been winking at redemption anyway.
Exactly.
I mean, they pay lip service to it, but they don't actually.
They even call them the new sages.
Exactly.
They make a differentiation between the old conservative diehards and the new ones who are post-printing.
Post-human. Post-human.
What? Well, there were quite a few in the early ages who were like, let's kill the humans.
Yeah, that's true. And their horses. Let's definitely kill their horses.
Let's kill the humans and their horses. But then a smaller group said, no, let's hide them away on the spectral flow. Okay. I think we've talked about everything from the first half of this book. Red, you got any more predictions? Come on, one more.
I think we're going to find out more about why the star next to Jijo has that big soot force field. Because when they fly through, Streaker
is Minuti.
Yeah, well, whatever. The Streaker has so much soot that it literally can't fly. They have to like clean it up.
Yep.
And there's a reason why that's there.
And it's a strange soot too. Did you catch that?
Yes.
Because it's a room temperature superconductor that's apparently just being exuded by a star.
No, I didn't catch that part.
It's not quite a superconductor, but it's like not too different from one.
But it makes sense that I think that it's probably there to shield the planet because the planet's full of a bunch of psi rocks. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I think a bunch of the dolphins are going to stay when this is all said and done and just go back to being dolphins and not neo.
Instead of the 6, you think there might be a 7?
Yeah. No, because I think they'll be much more like the Glavers.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know that they're going to get off the planet, the Streaker. I don't know.
I mean, things aren't looking good for them, are they?
No. I mean, their main engineer is gone. Their secondary engineer is stuck inside a computer. The dolphins are doing the best.
He's not inside a computer. He's just half computer.
He can't move around, though.
Yeah, he can. He can move.
Oh, that's not the impression I got. Anyway.
He can move. He just doesn't have normal senses like he used to. because now he can have like
okay.
direct video pickups into his consciousness.
So he's Murderbot now.
He's much more like Murderbot now. Yeah. Yep. He's very much like Murderbot. Without the ability to kill you 5 ways from Sunday.
Right. So I definitely think a bunch of the dolphins are just going to become regular old dolphins again, and that I don't know that there's enough to have a big enough gene pool for them to survive, but I don't think they're leaving. They've got a perfect ocean for them.
They do say that the waters of Jijo are so tempting that they're probably going to lose even more just because of that.
So anyway,
that it even has like basically an equivalent of whale songs
yes,
being caused by like convection currents and the seismic activity of the slope.
right.
It
And
scares Ka, but it like really reassures the primal part of him.
I think those are my only predictions. I can't.
What do you think's going to happen with Dwur?
Hmm.
Is he going to go to Streaker?
Oh, you mean like in the next couple chapters?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's gonna go. He doesn't really have a
It's
lot of
gonna happen
options
with
right
Reddy.
now. Well, he doesn't really have a lot of options. He's like in the middle of nowhere and no food. They haven't eaten in like what, 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, it's been a while.
I thought they just had some really bad food. I thought they had like jerky.
Either way, they're
like Dwur's homemade jerky.
Well, either way, they basically don't have an option. They're going to have to go into Streaker. What Dwur will think of Streaker, I have no idea.
Yeah. I feel like Dwur is one of those people who carries around what's essentially leather as an emergency backup ration. Okay. So I think if that's everything, we can wrap up for today.
That sounds good.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today about our talk of Infinity Shore. Be sure to check in on the Discord and join us for our continuation of the series. We're going to be doing 3 more episodes at least, and love to talk about it with you. Thank you, Horizon Brave, for starting the Green Team, and thank you, Craig, for lending us out this corner of your media empire. Have a good night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys. This one's going to be a to edit.
Yeah, it really is. We were all over the place.